I'm afraid to tell people everything that's going on. I, as an exec, either because I don't think you should know, this isn't for the kids to know, or because I want to protect you, right? I'm doing it for the right reason, but that fear makes top leaders not be transparent.
Welcome to the Unconventional Leadership Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential as a leader. Thank you, everyone, for joining this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. We are so grateful that you're here and a part of this community. I want to welcome my guest back to the studio, James Biro. So, James, thank you for joining me again today.
Mike, great to be back. And we were just talking about it. 1918 almost, it feels like, right?
It feels like 1918.
2018 was the last time that we did this.
Episode 11.
Beautiful.
Still one of the hottest, most listened and watched to episode ever, which we're going to trumpet with this one. So
beautiful. And a great way to kick off the year, too.
Great way to kick off the year. So for those who know, as we launch into the new year, this is a time of year where we're thinking about new visions and new possibilities and new alignments as well. I always tell people that every year you have to re-onboard your team to what we're doing this year. I'm a big believer in that onboarding repeats itself. Every year I got to realign to vision, values. I've got to make sure we all want to be here and everybody's ready to convene and attack and go after the big dreams of the new year. So I'm excited to have you help us walk through that kind of conversation.
And more, right? I think when we say, hey, you have to reload in the new year, the world just changes more and more quickly every day. And it sounds totally cliche, but it does.
Yeah.
And making sure that you've got that north for your team and that you're keeping everybody together just becomes even more and more important, I think.
Absolutely. And the scale piece is always what intrigues me. So many of our clients that we support are what I would call small to mid-sized businesses, anywhere ranging from nonprofits to companies from 50 to 600 million in revenue. And then we have upper echelon organizations that we've supported that have grown into $1 billion, where we were supporting their growth, whether that was from 150 million to 350 million. And what's the scaling look like? I'm always intrigued by leaders who have led on a global basis, because I think it's something that international experience and the global perspective is very different than a pure domestic perspective. And I also am inspired by leaders who just the vast size of what you're leading blows me away. So that's what you have done most of your career, right? So when you think, oh, I've got 3 manufacturing plants or 5 locations, well, let's put that on amplification when we talk to James. So I'm excited to hear how you bring it together from a vision perspective and operationalizing, aligning humans to a big vision in variety of location. And then how do you create clarity and create team and create a sense of people alignment and culture as you do all of that. So love for you to help unpack that small question that I just put up and just have a fun dialogue around it, right? Let's be helpful for those who are joining us into this conversation today and see where we might go.
Beautiful. So you talk about scale, right? And just for reference there, have led organizations of, like right now, Sara Lee Frozen, 4 manufacturing sites, 1,200 people, 600 million in revenue, all U.S., a little bit Canada-based, right? Mm-hmm. But you go to the other extreme, probably would be Kerry Foods, right? 4 billion in North America, 60 plants just in North America, right? Import, export from 140 some countries, every time zone, every culture, everything that you can imagine. Yeah. Right. And more as I've grown up in my career, you distill things a little bit. And I tell people now that I'm kind of even embarrassed to say it, but if folks really knew what they're paying me for as a leader, they might feel ripped off a bit, because you realize that those simple blocks are the ones that work at a plant level, right? If you're the ops manager in a plant, and they work when you're leading a 60 plant network in import-export over 143 countries, right? And you talked about it, Mike. I think there's a balance of two really big blocks of work. One is the big picture, the strategy, the vision, right? At the same time, you've got to be able to keep the wheels turning every day, especially in operations, right? So there's that balance of how do you communicate the big picture and work on the strategy while saying, hey, day in, day out, order 45332 has to get out at midnight. And that becomes a really interesting balance.
Are there I know there's technologies and softwares and things to do that, but what are the general frameworks that you've learned that are most effective to align these two topics?
Absolutely. So definitely, as we have evolved, there are many, many systems, softwares, tools that really help you. But I'd like to look at it again in those two buckets, right? And if you think of the strategy piece, a lot of times I talk about launching a rocket, right? If you're talking about transformation in an organization, what better analogy than saying, hey, I'm going to launch you to a new world? Maybe a little bit exaggerated, but you know what I mean, right? And you look at three key things there, right? And in my early P&G days, they called it strategy, development, and deployment. And it's just a system of saying, do you know where you're going? Do you know what the plan and fuel is? And do you know what's going to bind you together? So let's stick to the rocket analogy, right? First and foremost, right? You've got the technology, everybody's ready, the rocket's going to launch. In my world, the R&D folks have done their work, right? The technology part is there. First really important part is, do we all know where we're going? You point the rocket the wrong way and there's going to be trouble, right? And it can't be that one control center or one astronaut or thinks we're going a different way. So that strategy development piece and making sure that you know exactly where you're going is super critical, right? So the first piece is direction. And how do you develop and then communicate? A lot of organizations fall short there. I've got a great vision. Just 10 people at the top know. Not going to work, right? The second part is one part that I'm really passionate about, which is the energy, right? How do you get that blast off? How are you going to create that spark? And again, a rocket is a really good example. So now we know where we're going. What's going to fuel it? And it's leadership, and it's a really deep understanding of why we want to take off, right? And that's critical to change management. And now imagine that same rocket, right? You've got the right direction, you've got all of this energy, and you've got the right leadership, and you take off. There is a huge risk of everything falling apart there, right? All of that energy, if there's not a glue, then it'll come apart. And cliche as it may sound, critical to an organization and to leaders in that organization is trust as that glue, right? So I think that's, if I had to describe, hey, how do you go through putting that strategy process, and how do you bring the team together, make sure that everybody knows the direction we're going in, make sure everybody is energized and feels your energy and has the fuel and the motivation to go, right? And then finally, how do you tether everybody together to say, we trust that we're doing it for the right reasons, we trust that there's the right capability in the organization, and we trust that we're doing it for the right thing. And I think that's how you take care of the big picture part of it.
So, James, as you describe the understanding the vision and how clear is the vision to, I think you referenced 10 people, how do you actually get that down all the way to the shop floor of 1,200? Like, what have you found to be most effective for leaders to not just, because we always say often at Talent Magnet, like the challenge with strategic planning is that there is a select group in the room, and there needs to be, right? There's a certain level of experience and expertise that you need to help create the strategy. But how do we actually bring that vision that creates clarity and communication down to the rest of the organization is where most organizations completely fall flat, right? And then they walk around and say, well, you all know the strategy. It was posted on the shared drive or put out in an email or communicated. But some don't even do that. I mean, some are like, I haven't ever seen our company's strategic plan. I hear about it. Then executives go, I wonder why it's so difficult to actually achieve the vision that we set forth. It was clear to us that these were the goals for this year. Why didn't we hit them? And I usually, our team comes in and says, well, aligning it to all of the humans in your organization is the most difficult and the most lacking thing in most organizations, right? So if you have a team who everyone is clear and who everyone feels like their role aligns to that vision and strategy and they see themselves and their purpose here, now you have magic, right? You have the actual belief and possibility that everyone in the organization understands what it takes for me to help the organization achieve. And then vice versa, the organization needs to be doing the same experience for the employee to help them achieve and accomplish greatness. But what I just unpacked there doesn't happen in most. So what have you found to be helpful on that first component of putting a rocket into the next atmosphere?
So I'll tell you, and this might sound a little bit out there, but I think it goes into two parts of executive leadership, and they are fear and hubris.
Okay.
And I really think that a lot of the times it's, first off, I'm afraid to tell people everything that's going on. I, as an exec, either because I don't think you should know, this isn't for the kids to know, or because I want to protect you, right? I'm doing it for the right reason, but that fear makes top leaders not be transparent. The other component of it could be hubris, right? You don't need to understand this. You don't get this. And you see organizations where executives will feel like they're the grown-ups in the room. Wait a minute. I don't see anybody in your whole organization that is under the age of 18, right? So don't treat them like kids. And I think a lot of that is where the message gets lost. So first off, definitely you have to have a cascading, which is, how do I explain this at every level of the organization so that every level of the organization understands it? Got it. But at the same time, when you start doing that and you start keeping part of the story out, or people know,
Filtering.
Mike.
Oh, yeah.
People absolutely know when you're not telling the whole story and when you're not being totally transparent. And I'll give you the example. This is the first time that I've done private equity, right? So it's my first leadership assignment in private equity. And the first time that you go to a plant and people say, well, this is really just about selling the company, right? What do you tell them? And what do you tell them is, yes, it is. And let me explain to you how private equity works, what's important to our owners, what that means to you, right? And then suddenly you can have these really open, grown-up conversations about, this is how the strategy brings us all together. And these are the pieces where we all win, right? Making sure that your shift is delivering on quality product safety makes the plant be successful, which, gets us closer to a transaction.
Sure.
But that just makes whoever's going to buy us want to have you, your plant, right? How do we find that piece where, first off, here's the elephant, right? Let's talk about the elephant. Second, let's see in that world where we all win. And when you can get that, right? People start signing up. People start saying, I get it, right? And you talked about it. A lot of times it's, but we rolled out the mission statement. Mission statement isn't what's going to bring people to work every day. Right? It's, what am I doing that's value added and that is going to bring out my passion? Why do I really want to do this? And when you can bring that out and explain, okay, here are the business building blocks, and this is where your passion comes in. Something else happens that I've learned as a leader, Mike. You start seeing people for who they are, not for, come on, this is the vision and follow it, Mike. It's, this is the vision. And Mike, because I know that you're passionate in developing people and building teams, this is how I think you can help the vision. It's a completely different proposal, right? And people start really owning it and wanting to go after it.
So part of, in your description here, this is a challenge for us as leaders, right? We need to work this muscle, because you may or may not have ever seen this muscle worked for those that you've worked with. You may have always thought there's a gap. I wish someone had taught me or shown me a way to align the overall mission to every individual function, location, and role. And that's what we're doing here, right? We're trying to provide skills, strengths, new thoughts and perspectives to get people to go, wow, I'm going to watch that again, because I want to bring that into my daily leadership. Absolutely. I want to think about, when you were describing, James, because again, I'm like, this is my jam. This is what I love. This is what I'm so passionate about. And I was hearing you describe the role from a plant manager's perspective of, well, how do I even fit in? Because this is really your goal. And all of a sudden you started describing to that individual, and I was able to say, wow, even I see it. My role in that particular scenario, I'm now seeing my role, my plant, my facility, my team, and the impact it can have on the total success of the strategy and of the leadership team, of the private equity firm in this case. And the more value I bring to that, and the more passion and energy I put into that for my team, the more successful we're going to become, which then elevates my career, right? Many of us who have been around private equity know that once you have a successful turn, all of a sudden it's like you have been knighted. You now understand the way of the leadership. And not every private equity does great things, but many do. Many family offices who are buying portfolio companies and scaling and growing, they're doing that because they know they have a certain strength about them that allows an organization, like if we can put your organization into our strengths, bring your strengths to our strengths, it's going to be, 1 + 1 = 13, right? And so hopefully those participating in this discussion hear the difference, right? So we want to make things actionable. We want to help people go, you know what? I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to try to show up in a way to help connect dots. Because what James just mentioned was connecting dots. You just shared, like, here's how you start connecting dots. We will be right back. We're going to take a moment to hear from our sponsors and partners.
So one of the hardest parts about podcasting is the moment you stop talking. I mean, think about it. The majority of the work that you probably put into creating a podcast is in the editing phase. So what if you didn't have to do the editing phase? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you just come in and talk. We do all the rest. We have the cameras, we have the microphones, we have the lights, and then we have the editing tools to create the perfect content out of your podcast. Not only do you get the full podcast in video and audio, you also get short form content that you can use across all of your pages in social media. So if you want to learn more, go to CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com/tour to learn more and schedule your tour with us today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation. Now, what do I do if I'm concerned that the majority of the workforce, the managers and directors serving the majority of the workforce, don't have that strength? What do I do? What do you do as a leader if you identify, like, I think there's a gap in a certain area and certain population of our organization that, like, there's got to be some type of leadership gap there, and I need to go explore that to understand where's the gap exist, because I need that section of the organization to be highly optimized, aligned, and believing in what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm sure there's been times where it's rolled up back to you that you're like, they clearly don't believe in what we're doing yet, because they probably haven't been inspired and brought energy from someone in their function or division to do so. Does that question make sense?
It makes all the sense in the world. First and foremost, you role model it.
Okay.
Right? So as we were talking about, hey, how do I make this actionable? It's how do I make sure that I've got a system that takes the company vision, puts it into actionable steps that mean something to each part of the organization, right? And then the roll up is that's the tactical, that's the metrics part. That can be easy, right? If I'm in operations talking to R&D about what's important to them, I can talk about their vertical startups. I can talk about their time to market. How do I, again, have that conversation that says, and the way we're successful, right? All of that is the direction of the rocket ship. The glue that's going to bring us together is when we trust that we're doing the right thing together. And that's where you have to be really comfortable getting outside of your own swim lane, right? And saying, if the leadership in another organization isn't doing it, I'm going to step in.
Okay.
Now, two things. I talked about role modeling. So first, make sure that you've done it with your organization.
Correct.
When people come and talk to my organization and say, hey, Biro's talking about all this stuff, everybody should say, yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Right? And then you start sitting down and having the same open, transparent conversations of, hey, this is where we want to go, direction, right? This is why it would be really energizing for us to do it together. And lastly, this is why you should trust me in doing it. The way that I normally do it is I'll go to the head of that function and say, hey, I see a mismatch between our teams here, and have that open conversation. And then ask for hey, are you okay if I go talk to your folks about how they can mesh with my folks better? 9 times out of 10, folks will jump on, right? For one of two reasons, either because, hey, yeah, James, this is the right thing to do, or, hey, you're crazy if you're going to go talk to my team without me being there.
Right.
But then you bring that together. And again, right, if I could give one piece of advice, is having those open, transparent, really, really conversations is the tool.
Yeah.
Right? And it's uncomfortable, right? Managing that conflict and that uneasiness is not easy, but that's really our role as leaders, right? Having charts and putting KPIs out and putting business plans together, that's our technical role.
Sure.
Our real leadership comes in bringing those really, really conversations to the table. Be it my team, or if your team isn't jumping on board, how do I jump in and get them there?
Yeah, it's been interesting as we've gone through, even for ourselves. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I spent weekends and evenings building the strategy. What book did we use?
The Business Model Canvas.
Business Model Canvas. So recently, my junior in high school was asking me from his business class, "Are you aware of this Business Model Canvas thing that we were told?" And I was like, "Actually, I am," because I remember we literally printed out. I don't even know how big it was. It was as big as the wall behind us, and we spread it out. And we were building the Business Model Canvas, and we were creating and planning. I actually think I know we still have all the details of it. I'm curious how far we've come. Because then we went from that model and we started using EOS for our strategic planning. The thing to me that's the competitive advantage of owning a strategic roadmap and saying, like, this is our system, is that you're consistently discussing it, right? So you're not building it and throwing it into a shelf or throwing it into a folder or sending out some type of shared file. It's every week, every day, you're thinking about, all right, what are my goals? What are the rocks? What do we need to achieve? How does this all cascade down? Who do we need? How do we accomplish it? What do we do to overcome challenges that may keep us from achieving this goal, this quarter, this month, this week, et cetera? And when we're talking about operationalizing it and bringing it into the everyday, I think you described it as the professional kitchen. Like, we're constantly working on creating what we're about to accomplish. So it's not just, hey, here's what we're going to do. Godspeed. Look forward to seeing you on 12/31.
May you land in peace.
May everybody achieve its mission, right? It's back to your point of a rocket ship. We don't just say, hey, we're hoping this thing's going to go into the atmosphere. We hope we're going to hit this area and location. We hope all of the engines are going to work. When we hit the go button, we'll see you on the other side. It's no, everything is calculated. Every objective, every mission, every goal. And then that's where we get those cascading plans, right? So bringing a strategic plan to life, bringing a vision to life takes consistent work. And as you were describing what you were just recently, I was thinking, like, that's the role of a leader, right? That's the ultimate role of a leader. The ultimate role of a leader is aligning humans to what we need to accomplish. And when you get really good at that, everything happens, right? I mean, there's things that even today that I feel like I get pulled into that I'm like, I respect and value that I've been invited to this conversation, but this is not where I can highest and best serve. It takes a while to learn that, because at some point you want to be invited to every conversation, right? But also at some point you're like, hey, this is I need to know it. I need to know enough about what you need me to be aware of, but also this is my lane. So if there's anyone else I can serve here, anyone else I can support in this area, I will be the internal expert. I'm happy to partner and mentor and coach and equip and train and develop others. But getting people to that level of confidence takes a lot of clarity and alignment, and the cascading effect is creating the clarity so that every week we go, hey, here are the 3 things I need to accomplish this week. When I do this, it helps us get to this over the next month. When we do this, we accomplish these objectives quarterly. So breaking down rocks quarterly and creating the operational plan that every week we should only be focused on what we say are our biggest rocks. Things are going to come up. I get it. But when they do come up, the filter is, how do we overcome what just came up to still achieve the rocks that were set forth? So if you don't have a level of clarity in your organization, there's a part of the planning and the approach that's being taken that could be affecting that. If you feel like, I don't know where we're going, rowing in multiple directions in the same canoe doesn't work.
Not very well, no.
And if the canoe is the vision and is the goals and the objectives, it's all aligning at the same time. It's like the analogy I use all the time, right? Because if you've ever seen a rowing team in excellence, it's kind of unbelievable. Every time I see it, it's like, that's the kind of organization I want to create, right? Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows their impact of their role, and everyone is doing it with excellence and training at excellence in their role. And it takes a lot of leadership. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of hard work and effort and pain and struggle to get this aligned to accomplish greatness, right? So let's talk about the professional kitchen.
So a couple of things before we dive into, because that'll be the other part, right? Okay, now let's execute. But you touched on something that's really important there, Mike, and it's aligning humans is what you called it, right? Mm-hmm. And aligning humans is a really messy endeavor, right? And I think that's the part that sometimes breaks down. Back to your original question of why do you think it breaks down? A lot of leaders don't want to deal in the messy, right? They want to deal in the business canvas, to operational plan, to quarterly results review. Those processes are vital, right?
Correct.
And when done correctly, they're clean. What happens in between to align people, to get people back on track, to manage conflict between parties?
Yeah.
is super messy.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of gut-wrenching, emotionally charged time that sometimes we as leaders shy away from, right?
Yep.
And that's where the glue is going to be, right? Once people see that you get into those discussions, you build a level of trust that, back to the analogy of the rocket ship, that's the glue that's going to make sure that I don't care how many G's I'm going up at. I don't care that I'm going through the stratosphere. We're not going to come apart.
Yeah.
Right?
We're doing this together.
So that's really important. But you talk to the other side of this discussion, which is a real passion of mine, which is, okay, you've got all of the strategy. You've got all of this vision part. Okay, how does the day-to-day, right? And as an operations guy, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
For me. It's okay, great plan. Now let's deliver. And you mentioned it. The professional kitchen is a great place. There's a gentleman called Dan Charnas who has a book called Work Clean. Okay. And he did a lot of investigating of the best business processes there are. And he said, just go to a professional kitchen. Right? And I'll give you the analogy when we all say, and you were talking, Mike, about, I don't know who in the organization has the capability and at what level they know. And the Culinary Institute of America has a San Francisco and a New York operation, right? The standard for culinary training in the US and maybe the world. The one in New York has a restaurant called American Bounty. It's a training kitchen. It is a restaurant that will take you months to get into. And every 3 weeks, the whole staff turns over because they have their trainees serve this really high-level kitchen, right? And Dwayne Lipuma is one of the chefs. His whole reputation lies on a bunch of newbies delivering, right? And it comes down to 3 things, they say, right? It's, do you have the right process? Do you have the right preparation? And then, especially for a leader, do you have the right presence, right? So if we unpack those a little bit, preparation in my world is all about integrated business planning, S&OP, demand supply, financial projections. That's easy, if you will. Right? There are many planning processes that are tried and true. Oliver White did all of the integrated business planning and S&OP stuff in the 80s, and that stuff still works. If I had to put one process in place in an organization, right? Put integrated business planning in place. Okay. Brings everybody together. If you plan the right way, and for a professional kitchen is the hours on end before anybody comes in to cook, where people are making sure everything's clean, everything's chopped, everything is stocked, because you can't hit rush hour and oops, we ran out of oil. Right? So the plan has to be there. Yeah. The second thing is everybody talks about, I ate a Chef Lipuma dish. No, you didn't. It was a starting wage person in the kitchen who had a really well-perfected process. So what are the processes in your business so that people can repeat, right? And it doesn't have to be Mike. It can be somebody who graduated 3 weeks ago from college doing something for Centennial or for the Talent Magnet Institute. And the process is so well-defined that even James could do it, right? When I talk process with my folks, I say, we're going to get this to James proof. And that's the level where now it's repeatable. So I've got the right plan. Everything was in place to execute. I've got a process that'll make it repeatable. And in my world, those are the Toyota production systems. Those are the daily direction setting systems. Those are, and again, right, there is a lot published out there on daily management systems. The day in, day out process to repeat it, to do continuous improvement, to do Six Sigma. So you've got the planning part. You've got the process that is going to get you the execution that you need. Here comes the secret sauce. And it works that way in a kitchen as well. And I love it. And it's the presence. And in the book, Dan Charnas walks through the criticality of where the chef spends his time and when, right? A really good chef knows what part of the kitchen is struggling. A really good chef knows, you know what? My meat folks are dead on, but my sauce guy is newer. I'll support a little bit more here. A chef knows when there starts to be conflict in the kitchen that needs to be resolved. Okay. A chef knows the external market and what the demand is going to do and they are orchestrating everything happening in there. And I love that analogy because that really is, as a leader, right? There are 24 hours in a day. You're going to sleep some of them. You're going to spend some of them with your family. So that leaves you a finite amount of time that you're going to spend on your business. Knowing where to spend it, knowing exactly where you're needed. And back to your point, right? Okay, I could be invited to these 10 meetings where I'm not adding value. But you know what? Today, there's been a major issue at a small plant in Spokane, Washington. Totally hypothetical, maybe, right? And you grab the next plane, and your presence makes the difference.
Yeah.
And knowing, first off, how to have the right planning processes in place. Second, how to have the techniques and the daily management of your business. Because you said it, right? Hey, I've got the strategy, but now it's how am I delivering day to day to day? And how do I know if there was a deviation?
Right.
Books on end, techniques. If anybody ever wants to chat about it, I can fill up your ears with a lot of really good tools down that place. The really interesting part is you as a leader and where your presence and what your presence looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because your tone as a leader has to be different in different days.
Yeah.
And getting that right is the art part of the professional kitchen. And that's why professional chefs are magic makers that they are.
We will be right back. We're going to take a moment to hear from our sponsors and partners. Our mission of connecting businesses with the talent and resources necessary to help you achieve your vision and unlocking human potential are what Centennial and Talent Magnet Institute have been all about now for a collective 55 years. Centennial celebrates our 50th year, TMI is going into our 5th year, and we are ready to help you and your team get to the next level of strategy, vision, and achievement. Feel free to reach out and send us a note, and let's have a conversation. Yeah, and you can, again, I love the visualization. I love to be able to visualize this, right? Because if you've been in at what any level of restaurant there is, there's these three elements, right?
Absolutely.
And if you've been at a fast food chain, all three of those exist. If you've been at a high-end restaurant or anything in between, but I love bringing it to where so what part of production to get the plates out to the customer needs attention. And that's where I need to focus on now, right? And that's what you're referencing as a leader, the presence, and then how you just referenced and how your presence shows up may have to vary. Can you go into a little bit more on that? What have you learned about that in terms of what energy you're bringing into these conversations and what presence the team needs and how to tell how to show up in these situations?
Absolutely. And there, I wish that there were an equation, right? There's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a lot of learning. But at the end of the day, that's what in air quotes everybody calls the people part of the business, right? But it truly is, right? It's knowing when a team is in a lull and they need a shakeup, and you're going to do it emphatically, caringly, but decisively, right? And when you need to make an intervention of, hey, right, we can do better.
Yeah.
It's knowing when a team is to their wits' end and they're doing everything they can, but it's just a hard slug. And when you need to be empathic, right, and reach across to them. And even the more important part, and that's really hard for leaders, and when we call ourselves leaders, we want to lead, right? What should I be doing? I should be leading. My dad always said that you've got to learn unleadership. There is such a thing as the moment where the best thing you can do is just disappear. And it's really interesting. If you empower your teams the right way, there's times where you need to leave a vacuum so that another leader can come in. A lot of times what happens is I own the business. I own the results. And you fill up the room, right? And trust me, I tend to be an energetic leader, and I can fill up a room. Sometimes it's the worst thing you can do because there's no space for anybody else. And it's really hard to say, I am the chief, whatever you want to be. And what I need to do right now is reduce myself to the smallest representation of me that there can be and let others step into that space. It takes vulnerability. It takes a lot of trust in who you're opening the space to. It's tough, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes you fall flat on your face. Every time
It's leadership.
you learn,
Yeah.
right? But it's that part. And it's the presence of saying, when do I have to appear on a shop floor at 3:00 in the morning? Just for the sheer impact of it. Holy, right? When do I have to put my arm around somebody and say, hey, we're going to get through this. Don't worry. Easy does, right? And more importantly is, do you know what energy management for your team looks like? And sometimes you need to be putting the energy in. Sometimes you need to be the buffer and the umbrella, right? And give people that space. And that, Mike, to me, is the best part because you see people step up. I use the analogy when I ran the Kellogg plant here in town. At the beginning, whenever there was an executive visit, I would lead the visits through the plant, right? And as the team evolved and as we got a lot stronger, it was super fun. We had CEO visits where I'd be dilly-dallying at the end of the line, right? Let somebody else do it. Now, in between, there were a lot of pushes and pulls and coaching and knowing how to get to that level means that your presence was at the right spot at the right time. And that's really where I think the really hard part and the really rewarding part is in leading teams.
And I like your feedback of, and it all just takes time and experience, right? What we're trying to highlight is these are new ways or thoughtful ways, or you hearing something again for the third time, for the fifth time, for the seventh time, just to help build strength and build, you know what, I need to think about that. So start, if I take that feedback around the energy of, what energy did I bring to the room? What energy could I brought to the room? What energy should I have brought to the room? And what would I do next? Just evaluating that in scenarios gives good experience and good dialogue to me, the leader, thinking about, you know what? When have I felt like I needed to fill the room up and I probably didn't need to do that, or didn't fill it up as much as I should have filled it up, right? Like all of these evaluations, this is what gives, again, it gives strength to unlocking your potential, and it gives strength to unlocking the team's potential and the organization's potential, because having someone do that tour when they knew that you used to do that tour, one, they're a little nervous, but by the second or third or fourth time, they're like, I think I actually give better tours than James. Right? And you're probably saying, you know what? That was awesome. That's exactly what people wanted. And what better way to give confidence to your customer, to your whatever your stakeholders are, to see other people who are in the work themselves. Like, this is a great ran facility. Clearly there's great leaders here. In fact, the person doing the tour, what is that person's role? And where should they be in the next role? Because that person had confidence. You know, there's all these ways of building confidence and unlocking potential is almost at times you're pushing people forward. I've used analogies and stories before, like those who you think about in your career who helped you at the right time, nudged you to the front of the conversation.
Yep.
Right. And maybe they came to you after a meeting and said, you know, hey, those 2 questions you asked, you do know that everyone in the room had that on their mind. And you were the only one daring enough to ask that question. And then you asked it again because you still didn't think the conversation was done. That's leadership, right? You know, the way you engage the audience in the room. You knew that this individual and this individual naturally sit back and let everything else happen. And yet we find in many times those who go quiet in a room of 15 people or in a town hall of 135 or, you know, however many people, they're the ones actually doing the work. We need their voice and their perspective to show up. Again, that's leadership. But I always remind us all that people did that for us, right? When your father said, you know what, let's talk about unleadership. That was a lesson learned. And you may have thought about that for months or even years until you actually said, I wonder if that's what Dad meant, right? And then you're like, oh, this is actually a key tenet of my leadership now. So
after thinking he was crazy and out of
course, what's unleadership? You got it all, you got it all wrong. That's not the way you say it. But this is life. You know, when you were referencing earlier, I'm thinking like, this is peopling, right? This is what happens. This is how we learn. This is how we grow. This is how we strengthen. And it's okay to reflect and take notes and say, you know what, next time I'm in that conversation, I want to try this. And I want to see how just doing this one thing changes the dynamic of the conversation. And then you reflect after that and go, did it change the dynamic? A little, but I think if I were to do this additional thing the next time, I think it would even level up. And that's what we're talking about. These micro learnings, these micro affirmations and experiences help us just keep getting stronger and keep working the muscles that are our leadership.
And when you say those nuggets, right? And hey, I approached it a little bit differently. If I could say one thing there to everybody who's listening, what if you took the chance to say, it's not that we lead businesses. I think that's the paradigm that needs to change. We lead people who are in businesses, right? And I've had the opportunity, I've been blessed that a lot of people had given me opportunity to run very diverse businesses. At the end of the day, what you learn is it's not the business. It's I am leading people, sometimes making crackers and sometimes making ingredients and sometimes making detergent, right? But at the end of the day, don't start saying, hey, I'm a business leader. Start saying, I'm a people leader. And if I lead the people correctly, A, the business is going to go in the right direction. B, 10, 20, 1,000 times more fulfilling is when you get to that point and you say, hey, somebody came up and tapped you on the shoulder and said, you know what? I was able to grow because you gave me the space and you gave me the support to do that. At the end of the day, EBITDA, yeah, if I'm 92 on my porch thinking of what I did with my career, right? I don't know that I'm going to say, well, I turned EBITDA from this to that. I'm going to say there was this leader in this organization who I was able to help out. Yeah. Oh, by the way, when you do that, leaders grow, organizations get stronger, and the results come. Yeah. And it's a lot more fun and a lot more fulfilling to do it that way. Things that'll get me fired, I tell people that my management style is the hammock approach. Because I tell them that if I do my job correctly as a leader, I could swing in a hammock all day and the business would still be going right now. I don't know that my bosses would love me saying that my objective is to be in a hammock, but you know what I mean, right? It's how do you put it in place to say, I've grown leaders under me that, hey, you don't need me. I can go in the hammock.
Yeah. But there's also the opposite effect of people who are leading in a way of scarcity. and they're concerned about mobilizing and enabling and empowering others, because then what would my role look like, right? And so there is that component too of like, let's shift that mindset, because that's not why you're here. That's not why you're a part of our community at Talent Magnet Institute. That's not why when you hear unlocking human potential, you're like, yes, that's what I want to learn how to do. You may have even joined the community because you thought this title of Unconventional Leadership Podcast is like, I want to be unconventional, right? So we're helping. Now, that doesn't mean you just show up and you get that way. You may say, I'm actually concerned about developing talent underneath of me. So when I hear that as a leader, I think that's the kind of leaders I want, right? Who say, hey, over X amount of time, I'm going to empower, engage, enable humans all throughout the organization, where like, it's okay if I get removed at times, and it's okay if you throw me into a new challenge, because they're going to be able to functionally lead this and do it in a way maybe better than myself, because that's what we're trying to do as leaders.
Absolutely.
Everyone has strengths, right? Everyone has strengths once you understand your strength. Also, there's individuals who don't know their strengths yet. And our role as a leader is to help them understand that, see that. Maybe nobody pointed out their strength in their entire career. Maybe no one said, hey, I just want to let you know, I've noticed a superpower. You are phenomenal at this. And because of that, I want to put you in this leadership role, and here's why. And here's what we need from you in that role. And we need to just give you more opportunity to swim in that superpower, right? And elevate this, because every time you do this superpower, the whole room lights up. Things change. Have you ever noticed that the results just look different every time you show up with that superpower? And again, that's our role as leaders. That's what we want to do.
So I'll turn tables on you, right? And I'll interview you for a second, Mike, because I think this is really, really important. I've had a lens of seeing leaders and businesses in my career. You've had 20 times, right? You work with leaders and on leadership. When have you seen a leader that is just completely invested in developing people under them, and suddenly things and the organization grow under them, and they're not needed anymore, and organizations tell them, yeah, thank you, go away? Those
they don't always tell them.
Probably take them.
Yeah,
right?
They don't always say, thank you, go away. Sometimes they say, like I have a friend right now who's becoming a portfolio CFO of a role that has never existed. They've never had a portfolio CFO. But because he's done so well and he's so talented and skilled at what he does, he was asked by the family, you know what, we're thinking about this. And here's what I'm going to try to describe this. We're thinking about this new role because of everything you and this team that you've built has done. We now even have the role. The role is even a dream that could be a reality. Like, this new role has never existed in the history of our 50 plus years as an organization. But because of what you've accomplished, we're like, hey, I think we could do this. So we need you to find your replacement in the current role you're in,
so that you can go and do
so that you can move into a different role.
Absolutely.
And that particular piece, that does happen. I mean, I feel like it happens often. I think if many of us that are reflecting, if you've been around a healthy leadership team, most of you would say, I wouldn't be in this seat if it weren't for me doing what I enjoy and what I happen to do really well, and somebody recognizing it. So the recognition of leadership is something that's critically important. I try to encourage people, James, to recognize people.
Absolutely.
Right? At the end of the day, when was the last time you went around and recognized people? And I'll tell you, as fast as some of us move, we have to slow down and still provide recognition. And that can be a small text message, letter of encouragement, face-to-face, one-on-one, but making sure we're recognizing the awesomeness that we're seeing inside of people, which then says, hey, you know what? I know there's a role that's getting ready to open up and I'd like to apply for it. Do you think I'm ready for it? yeah, actually, I'm really glad I've been waiting for you to ask, or I was getting ready to ask, or, I don't yet, but I think you will be. And the fact that you just told me you want to apply for a new role and take a promotion, could we spend the next 12 to 18 months working on some key elements that can get you ready for that role? So that would be some perspective. I mean, very rarely does somebody say, hey, I think you've worked yourself out of a job. It does happen. I do know people who are like, you know what the coolest thing I get to do is? I get to work myself out of a job. It may take 3 years. It may take 7 years, but they almost pride themselves in, my role is to get the organization ready or aligned, mobilized, and executing with excellence. And then I get bored. I think it's more of a trait of I get bored. When I don't feel that cycle happening anymore of come in, align, empower, mobilize, achieve, then I exit. I want to go do it again. It's almost people, it's the energy that they bring. So they almost seek to make a transition because they're like, hey, I want to find another broken organization.
I resemble that
or
description,
a team, or a team that oh my goodness, if we just did this, look what could happen. Look at the possibility.
You can go, and when you have that skill set and you have that track record, you'll find what to do, and it'll find you.
It'll find you.
Right. And I think that's the part that as I was listening to you hits me of leaders who do that and empower their organizations. You're going to land up in the right space. Yeah. And the right space could be a new role was made for you. Good space could be, hey, I've done awesome for this organization, and now it's time to go do it somewhere else.
Yeah. And the other good thing it can do is it can help a company that's focused on a couple of things. And because they start doing those with excellence, they go, if we can do this,
hey,
do you think this is possible? So watching organizations expand because they've gotten those processes and people and presence and aspects fully aligned. What was the third P that you referenced? Processes?
So it's planning, process, and presence.
Yeah. So if we get those three and then we put people into the mix, all of a sudden you go, well, if we can do this. So I've been so fortunate and blessed that over the time of my short, 25-ish years, Centennial celebrating our 50th year this year, which is amazing.
Wow, congratulations.
And, my kind of halftime in that and our team, like Becky and I talk about it all the time, take a step back and think about what we've actually been a part of and what organizations and teams and humans have accomplished because of getting the right team in place, creating the right alignment, and then investing in those individuals and in your teams like there's no tomorrow, right? Because I know if I do those things, so we get to see companies go from here to here. And I think that's what part of what you're asking is we've also seen some of them not go as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And we've seen leaders not execute as well and them not be as open to new ideas. And again, it's usually a leadership challenge. It's like, well, I don't know if you really wanted to bring in a leader who does this and you brought that leader in and they tried to do that and you rejected the movement, it's a bigger challenge than I hired the wrong person.
But again, in those situations, a lot of times what you will see is the leader came in and said, I am here to lead first, right? To drive a business, instead of saying, I'm here, I've done this and I know how to do it, but this is a different group of people. The dynamics, the baseline, the culture is different. Now, you can bring all of those great things that you bring as a leader, but if you fail to say, and I've seen this, so my career started at P&G, right? And P&G shows you a way of doing things. And I've seen a lot of people struggle coming out of P&G because you go and you just say, well, this is the way you do it. Well, wait a minute, that works over there. But you're trying to plant this seed in totally different soil.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And having that acuity as a leader to say, I know what needs to happen, but I know that it needs to happen in this environment.
Yeah. In this timeline, in this way, and this.
In a different culture
Yeah.
with different people that have had totally different life experiences.
Right.
Now that takes a nuance, which is really important.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that's also why leaders can struggle saying, well, I know how to do this and I'm going to do it to the organization.
Yeah, it's a great point. If I think about what you just described, when I look at business executives who are in family or closely held organizations who have successfully come in and helped an organization grow over time, they have the strength of what you just described. And I'm sure this takes place in larger, or whether a family business is $8.5 billion or whether they're $80 million or 800 or 300, there's still this dynamic, right, of understanding, like, here's how they operate. I'm going to be fully authentic, fully transparent, and I'm going to have the patience to understand who they are and how they operate and how they structure, and yet still accomplish change. Not become complacent, still push for change. And then it's almost like there's a level of leading up, then getting chairman or owners or in-place executives who are a part of the legacy leadership to say, you know what, we're going to go with this new idea because I think this could be transformational. We also see this when organizations go, you know what, we know we've done really great work the last 37 years or the last 17 years or 25 years, and yet we believe the future is still ahead. And the greatest opportunity that we can do is take the foundation we've laid and build upon it. But in order to build upon it, we need new architects, new engineers, and new leaders in place, right? And I say those a little bit literal because it might need new architects and new engineers, or you might need new leaders who think differently, who build differently, who design differently, and who execute differently to take what you've built and accomplish. And I can tell you some of the most gratifying experiences is working with those kinds of leadership teams that say, you know what, here's our new strategic plan. We're going to almost unleadership and step back a little bit and put the right people in place to elevate us, to go further, faster, and go to new heights. Amazing success stories. And I can't wait to unpack a lot of those. I can't wait to have you back in the studio and keep jiving, keep having these conversations. And because the stories are amazing and we all learn through stories, whether you're reading, listening, or watching, we learn through these experiences. You can do it on your own and you can take time. Our goal is to kind of speed up some rate of, you know what, I am going to take that lesson learned and try to go learn, pick up that book and listen to that analogy more and take this approach. And that's what we're doing here, right? This is what we're constantly building. I personally have been incredibly blessed to have friends and colleagues and mentors like James. And part of my greatest blessing I'm trying to provide to the world is to share that, right? Because I've gained so much knowledge, how to think, and even thinking where I was just a short 10, 11, 12 years ago to where I was 8, 6, 5 years ago to where we are now wouldn't be even thinking the way I'm thinking without friends and advisors like you.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. And to anybody else, if you want to reach out, Mike has my contact, easy to find. Love having conversations on these topics. So would really love to connect with as many people as we can.
Thank you for being a part of today's conversation. We do invite questions, feedback, insights, perspectives that you're thinking right now as we wrap up this episode. We want the conversation. So thank you for being a part of our community and joining us for today's episode. Thank you for joining this episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, if you want to ask questions, if you want to leave a comment, please do. Please share. And even if you'd be so kind to rate and leave a review. I want to thank the Cincinnati Podcast Studio for the great production of this episode. We look forward to the next conversation to help you unlock your potential.